watching Canadian Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. From Toronto, Ontario, I'm Catherine Bullock. Assalamu alaikum and greetings of peace. Today we'll be interviewing Chloe Halpenny from the Basic Income Canada Youth Network about basic income advocacy during the campaign. First, some news headlines. Trudeau tells progressives to vote Liberal to prevent a Conservative victory. With only 6 days until the election on September 20, the two frontrunners are attempting to secure support in British Columbia and Quebec. On Tuesday, Justin Trudeau met the former leader of British Columbia's Green Party to make one last direct call to progressive voters. He is claiming that voting for the Liberals is the only way to defeat the Conservatives. The Liberals also said that voting for the New Democrats is like voting for the Conservatives. In an effort to appeal to Quebecers, Erin O'Toole from the Conservative Party wrote to Quebec Premier François Legault to lessen worries regarding the Conservative Party's childcare proposal. The Conservatives continue to criticise Trudeau for calling an election mid-pandemic. Tragic fire in Nova Scotia leaves a family of 6 dead. 6 bodies were found in Amherst, Nova Scotia last Sunday evening in a trailer fire. The victims have been identified as R.J. Sears, Michelle Robertson, and their 4 children, Madison, Ryder, CJ, and Jackson. The children's ages ranged from 3 to 11 years old. The family had planned to spend the weekend traveling, but were met with their last moments. On Monday, a memorial of the young family was kept in Amherst's Victoria Park, where family members of the deceased and members of the community paid tribute by placing flowers and toys around the gazebo. An Afghan child evacuated from Afghanistan reunites with his father in Toronto. A 3-year-old Afghan boy arrived in Toronto on Monday. Last month, Ali escaped a suicide bombing near the Afghanistan airport that killed 175 people. His father had evacuated Kabul 2 years ago and has been restless for weeks to reconnect with his son. Ali was separated from his mother and 4 siblings who remain in Afghanistan. He has spent the past 2 weeks in a Qatar orphanage. Judge in line to be first Muslim picked as permanent justice on Israel's Supreme Court. The potential nomination of a Tel Aviv District Court Judge Khaled Kaboub to the Israeli Supreme Court could make history, Israeli newspaper Haaretz reports. Kaboub is the District Court's deputy president and head of its economic division. He is a leading candidate for the Supreme Court appointment. About 21% of Israel's population are Arab Muslims. Since Israel's establishment, no Muslim has received a permanent appointment as a justice on the Supreme Court. Human Rights Watch and Israeli human rights organization B'Tselem declared Israel an apartheid state earlier this year. This is for its discriminatory treatment of Palestinians. That's it for the news headlines. Now we turn to an interview with Chloe Halpenny from the Basic Income Canada Youth Network about basic income advocacy during the federal election campaign this September. At election time, social justice advocates wish that the debates would focus on policies, not personalities. One policy that's gaining traction in this year's election in Canada, that's gaining support from all sides of the political spectrum, is something called basic income. To learn more about this, we're going to talk to Chloe Halpenny from Basic Income Youth Network Canada, if I got that the right way around. Hi, Chloe, and welcome to the show.
Hi, Kathy. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you. Basic Income Canada Youth Network, I believe.
It's a mouthful, we know.
So basic income is an idea I'd never heard of until I came across it by accident in 2017. Advocates say it's an alternative way of addressing poverty, and critics say it will lead to inflation and a lazy workforce. I know that there are a growing number of people interested in supporting it, especially this year. April seemed to be a good year for basic income. We had Winnipeg Centre Member of Parliament Leah Gazan from the NDP introduced Motion 46. She gained 40,000 signatures on her motion calling for a guaranteed livable income. We had 50 senators signing a letter asking the government to change the Canadian Emergency Response Benefit into a basic income. We had Liberal Party members at their convention vote for it. And just last week at the leaders' debate, we had Anna Maria Paul from the Green Party and the New Democrats, Jagmeet Singh, speak in favour of something like a guaranteed livable income. So let's just, before we jump into the more details of what you're doing in your youth network, for those of the viewers who might not have heard of basic income, just give us a little 101 on it, please.
Yes. Absolutely. Basically, the definition of a basic income is an unconditional cash transfer that goes from governments to individuals that would allow people to meet their needs, participate in society, and live with dignity regardless of work status. So that's the definition from the Basic Income Canada Network, which is another national network around basic income advocacy. But basically, we're talking about an amount of money that would be given from the government to people whose incomes fell below a certain level to bring them up at or above the poverty line without having to demonstrate any behaviors or attributes that they deserve or have to prove anything to receive that income. So it's really a more dignified approach to reducing poverty and addressing so much income insecurity and income inequality that we have in Canada. Canada actually has a really long history with basic income. So Canada had its first basic income pilot in Manitoba in the 1970s called Mincome, where there were a number of communities in Manitoba where folks were receiving income that would bring up their amount of money that they were earning up to a minimum level. And then there was another pilot that was run again in Ontario from 2017 to 2019 before being prematurely canceled by the incoming Conservative government. So basically, money given to people to ensure that they can meet their basic needs, no strings attached.
So it kind of sounds like free money, but one of the things that I understood from an Islamic concept, it's very similar to the idea of zakat, which is an obligatory charity that every Muslim pays every year. And it's given to those who fall below a certain line, like a poverty line, if you want to call it that, to help them meet basic needs, basically the essentials of life. And as human beings, everyone has a right to that kind of life, or that kind of access to those kinds of supports.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've done so much cool work around basic income, and it's always such a pleasure to get to speak to you about it. But I think one of the things that we like to think about when we think about basic income and kind of that no strings attached, just free money, is the fact that a lot of people are already doing things that are really valuable in society that aren't necessarily recognized in the paid labor market. So even though we might think of a basic income as kind of quote unquote free money, we know a lot of people that are receiving a basic income might not be able to work because they're disabled, for instance. People might be caring for family members, whether that's children or elders. They might be volunteering in their community, that there's lots of different ways to contribute that don't actually always mean participating in the paid labor market. So, even though it's free money, it can also be money that recognizes other forms of contribution and labor and work that isn't always recognized in our society.
And also a right to the commons, the commonwealth that is produced by the earth that we all have a stake in, and the right to the basics of life. So tell us then your network, Basic Income Canada Youth Network, which I believe is a newly formed organization this year, 2021. Tell us about why you wanted to get involved with that and what you've done.
Yeah, absolutely. So, as I mentioned, Canada has a long history with basic income and also a long history with basic income advocacy and activism. There have been some really incredible folks who have been doing organizing and advocacy work around basic income for well over a decade. And it was actually in April 2020 when the Basic Income Canada Youth Network came about, because, there was kind of a recognized gap in youth voices in the basic income movement, which was sort of ironic in many ways, because we knew that a lot of young people were supportive of basic income, that it was something that they were talking about, but that their voices weren't necessarily, being heard, or that they weren't necessarily actively involved in activism spaces about basic income. So I had been connected with a number of people, a number of other young people. We define youth as under 35. It's a generous definition, who were really interested in and excited about basic income. And we had some support from some other national and provincial level basic income organizations and groups. And basically, had been having these sort of informal conversations for several months about, what a youth network, a youth organizing group around basic income might look like. And then when the pandemic happened, all of a sudden, everybody was talking about basic income, largely because of some of the benefits that were coming out of the federal government, and just this realization that for so many people, income insecurity was just really close, actually. So that was kind of our April 2020 start date. Everyone was talking about basic income. We jumped onto the scene, had our first kind of public discussion, public event about basic income. And then from there, things have really snowballed. We kind of organize our work around three main pillars: so community building, education, and activism. And we've done everything from running letter writing campaigns to MPs. We wrote a letter in support of the senator's letter that you referenced early on, Kathy. We've met with members of parliament and senators. We have been kind of creating knowledge products and knowledge materials around, how a basic income might interact with gender equity, for instance, or finance or criminal justice. We have been kind of just teaching young people about basic income. We're really active on social media. So it's been a very busy year and a half. We've got lots of really great people who are involved and really excited about the cause, and still a long way to go for sure.
So how do you see the current campaign? Do you think that it's been getting the attention it deserved? How do you assess the debates, the candidate responses from all the parties?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a tough question. I think, from my perspective, basic income is getting more attention in this campaign than I think it probably has been ever before, if not in a very long time. And, basic income, or guaranteed livable income, is built into the Green Party platform. It's mentioned as something kind of aspirational in the NDP platform, not in the Liberal or Conservative Party platforms, although we do know that there are members of both parties who are in favor of a basic income. I think I was excited as well when Annamie Paul, the Green Party leader, as you mentioned, had some really great comments to share about basic income in the English leaders debate. But so I think it is getting attention. I think parties are realizing that income insecurity is a really big issue, and that for a lot of people, employment is not always going to be the answer to income insecurity, especially regular full-time employment in the formal labor market. But, I'm an advocate for basic income, so my response would always be that I think that there could be more attention being paid to it. This isn't a problem that's going to go away. I think income insecurity and poverty were really exacerbated by the pandemic, but these are really long-standing issues that aren't going anywhere anytime soon, unless we take some really radical measures to address them.
So we have just a couple of minutes left. And this is a little bit unfair for me to ask you to do it this way, but there may be people who are very skeptical of what we've said so far. How do you address the critics, the people who say it's going to lead to inflation or a lazy workforce, or it's better to just boost the current welfare programs that are already on the books?
Yeah, I think my response to that would always be, I'm a researcher by day. That's my day job. And my response would always be to look at the evidence. There has never been a nationally implemented basic income program, but there have been experiments and pilots, both in Canada and in countries and places around the world. And we know from the evidence that's told us again and again that the outcomes of a basic income program are overwhelmingly positive, that people don't leave the labor market in these huge hordes and masses. Many people are able to find jobs, are able to go back to school. People are spending money that they receive from a basic income on things like food and on clothing and better housing. People's health improves dramatically, which has some pretty significant, or could have some pretty significant downstream cost savings in terms of our healthcare system. The evidence is really overwhelmingly in support of the potential benefits that we could see from a basic income program. And that evidence is actually not really there when we're talking about our existing welfare state programs. So if we're thinking about social assistance, kind of some of those really stigmatizing, dehumanizing programs where benefit amount levels are set really low, the evidence actually shows that those programs, in addition to, again, being really stigmatizing for people, don't actually lift people out of poverty. It doesn't encourage people to go back to work. So really, we're a lot of the criticism of basic income is with a view to maintaining some of the programs that we have in place that actually aren't necessarily evidence-based. So my response is always to look at the data, look at the evidence.
Well, Chloe Halpenny from the Basic Income Canada Youth Network, we thank you for your time and for your work on trying to address poverty around Canada. Thank you very much for joining us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kathy.
This is Canadian Muslim News on Muslim Network TV. Stay safe. Until next time, God bless.